Hi everybody. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today, and I am particularly excited because KTH is the place where my journey began a couple of years ago. So thank you so much, Lisa and Gustav, for having me here, and thank you so much for coming. Well, you all know that fashion is one of the most polluting industries in the world for the extensive use of hazardous chemicals, carbon dioxide emissions, and overexploitation of natural resources. In particular, synthetic textile production uses on average 100 million tons of oil every year, and fashion is responsible for 10% of all carbon emissions globally. Well, my co-founders and I, and here is another co-founder of Egea, Giampiero, say hi. Giampiero, say hi. My co-founders and I wanted to find a solution to this, and in creating Egea Textile, our ambitious goal was to make a sustainable fabric from a plant byproduct, so that nothing at any point in the process will go to waste. So in collaboration with universities and research centers, we ran careful investigation on different agro-industrial byproducts. And after years of research and development, we finally realized that wine waste, that is to say the grape skins, stalks, and seeds that remain after crushing the grapes during wine production, is just ideal to be turned into a beautiful, eco-sustainable fabric. Well, we patented an innovative technology that allows us to transform wine waste into a bio-based leather for fashion, furniture, automotive, and packaging applications. In a nutshell, we are offering an eco-sustainable and cost-effective alternative to synthetic leather by replacing oil with a vegetal, renewable, and abundant raw material that would otherwise be incinerated or landfilled. So we embrace the concept of circular economy as we see wine waste and other agro-industry byproducts as a significant resource opportunity. The amazing fact about the project is that in the world, we have a plenty of feedstock. Let's consider that from 2 liters of wine, we can get almost half a kilo of wine waste, which is the raw material that we use to produce 1 square meter of Egea textile. So such an amazing potential and absolutely no worry about keeping up with the demands. And let's consider also that Italy is currently the largest wine producer, so it is the ideal country where to start our project. Well, the production process begins with the pressing of the grapes and the separation of wine waste. Both these operations are carried out by wineries. What we do next is desiccating wine waste to avoid degradation and to ensure that this quality is kept over time. And in this way, raw material is available throughout the year and is not dependent on annual harvesting period. After that, we run patented physical and mechanical treatments on desiccated wine waste, thus obtaining a bio-based compound, which is lipid, that is then coated on a backing textile and transformed into rolls of the Egea textile material. And the production process ends up with specific finishing treatments in order to give to the Egea textile material different levels of thickness, weight, elasticity, depending on the final application, because you know that each application has its technical specifications. For the production of Egea textile, we didn't have to build our own facility because we can use already existing textile machineries that just need to be adjusted and adapted to the bio-based recipe that we are using. And this is for sure a great advantage for us because it allows us to keep costs down and to rapidly scale the production. Indeed, we performed the last step of our production process thanks to the collaboration with a synthetic leather producer that already produces synthetic leather on a commercial scale. Well, we won the Global Change Award 2 years ago, in 2017, and what we had was just a few samples of the material. And after winning the Global Change Award, it has been a continuous growth. In fact, we have been recognized and supported by several private and public entities, such as the European Commission through the Horizon 2020 European Programme for Research and Innovation. And that was for sure a great validation of our work that is allowing us to grow our research team and to run further tests on our material. And we are now the Italian finalists of the Chivas Venture Competition for Social Entrepreneurs with our project on sustainable fashion. So if you have a minute to go and vote for us, online voting will open in a few days. So thank you for your support. And now we have industrialized the production process, and we are finally ready for commercialization. But of course, research and development will always go on in order to improve the material and to make it compatible with further applications such as packaging, automotive, aviation, and so on. Thank you so much for your attention.
I'm Canadian, but went to school in the U.S. and have spent sort of most of my time between the two countries. And started out as an investment banker focused on the technology sector, and then founded Rumi in 2013. And the simple idea behind Rumi was to bring the free digital learning revolution to the offline world, right? The idea was that you can learn anything for free online, but the people who have the most to gain are usually the least likely to access it because they're in places with poor internet connections, lack of devices, and so on. And so building off some of the work I'd done in my past life in sort of the early 2000s on investments to bring basic mobile phones into emerging markets as a leapfrog innovation. Same idea here. How can we leapfrog education effectively by doing what I call switching from books to bytes? And so where NGOs are shipping paper textbooks to remote parts of Africa and other places, can we do something as simple as build a low-cost tablet that really stores an entire curriculum on it and works fully offline? The idea is you're creating a library for the cost of a book that then is much cheaper to deliver content. It's interactive. You get data when they connect and so on. And then the last couple of years I've been at BlackRock sort of merging the two, really the investing piece and the sustainability piece and finding where there's an intersection to do both. And I'd say the three thoughts that I've sort of come out with in the last few years, one is the importance of sort of innovation and questioning models. Some of this may be stuff you've heard a million times before. I'll repeat it again anyway. But one of the things I learned having done turnaround investments was the importance of questioning pretty much everything in any situation. Because if you go into a company that is fundamentally has potential, but their financials are going down, they're close to bankruptcy, usually you'll have a situation where you go in and you ask people and they'll say, well, here's the way we do this because of that. Here's the way we do something else because of this. And there'll be a set of assumptions people take as for granted. And so it's good to develop that spirit of inquiry where you pretty much go in and question every single thing about it and don't take anything for granted, because a lot of the processes that are often used, whether it's purchasing or operationally or selling, are often there just because they've been there for years and the world has changed around it and businesses are slow to react. So I think it's an important thing to just really go in and build that spirit of questioning things, especially with sustainable businesses and where you're often doing things in a space that is near where the NGO space operates, largely because that space in particular is even less innovative and fast moving. NGOs, I don't mean this in a bad way, I think generally speaking are a bit slower to move and innovate, not because of the people, it's usually because of the funding. The funding they get is so long-term, so restricted by the funders, often government and foundations, that they have very little room to actually sort of, innovate and say, well, here we have this much money, what's the best way to solve the problem? They tend to be very stuck in spending the money in specific ways because they're restricted by the actual funders and or seized by a strong sort of academic influence where there's a lot of folks who have strong research backgrounds but then less on the execution edge, and so they move it slower. The first thing I'd say is in any of these businesses, I would encourage people, just go in and assume that everything might be wrong. It may not be, but that spirit of inquiry is something you want to start with. Second piece is on using technology. A lot of problems, social problems, can be solved and made better through the use of technology. I've spent time around in my entire career, I've founded organizations on it. I would also caveat that the technology has to serve the problem rather than the other way around. And one of the things I've tended to see is that it's just a natural fact of human nature. People will get very excited about certain new technologies and buzzwords, and they'll start with those and then sort of try to solve the problem after. And so I've seen all sorts of ideas around sort of like, we've done a lot of work for refugees in the Middle East, right? So offline education in refugee camps in Lebanon, Turkey, and Syria. I would see a lot of ideas where in competitions and so on, where people would say, here's an idea of using, Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency, big data, artificial intelligence for refugees. And you kind of look at it and you're like, but do they really need that? Or is this sort of someone wanted to use some new AI techniques, which are exciting and applied to a problem where it maybe doesn't actually fit? And a lot of what we did at Rumi was actually saying to ourselves that our goal wasn't to build cutting edge technology. Our goal was to build something where what's cutting edge is the economics, because it becomes affordable for communities where it was never affordable before. And so it's good. It's not really cutting edge technology. It's good technology with cutting edge economics and usability. Sometimes that means that you can't necessarily use the latest techniques unless they really fit. And sometimes has anyone ever heard of a show called MacGyver? So I always like the example of MacGyver because it's innovating a bit like MacGyver, because you might end up using a really rubber bands and paper clips to fix something, maybe not actually in your business model, but something like that is very frugal, very simple, and it's not sexy from a technology perspective, but it solves the problem cheaper and better than anything else. So that's the second piece. On technology, so it's one pitfall I tend to see often is that people will try to jerry-rig the latest cool technology into a situation where often maybe you're in a community where no technology has been used, and that's not actually appropriate. The third thing I'd say about sustainability, and that's now a lot from my day-to-day role sort of back in the financial sector looking at this, the real key of growing sustainable businesses is finding the intersection of, think of the Venn diagram between strong business practices and profits, whether you're an operating business or an investor, you're looking for financial return. So then it's financial return and all the numbers and dollars and cents make sense. But then also you have strong environmental and social outcomes. Pretty much every business has externalities, right? The idea in economics of, if you're a fossil fuel maker, you have externalities on the environment because frankly, they're not really paying, for the most part, their costs of their greenhouse gas emissions and so on. Those are the businesses in theory that the public sector should be, should tax in some way. They should make those companies pay the cost of that externality. Then you have companies that have positive externalities. They're building infrastructure, bridges, mobile phone networks. Those ones have positive externalities, and frankly, government ought to be subsidizing or giving breaks to those to incentivize them. A lot of sustainable investing is just figuring out and measuring where you can have more positive externalities in businesses from day one, or at least big companies shift in that direction. But the investment piece and the financial piece has to make sense. And I stress that because a lot of the origins of the whole sustainable investing space and impact investing didn't actually come from the investing space. It actually came from the NGO space, which means you have one really good skill set around sustainability, around measuring impact, but oftentimes you're missing the core business piece. And unless you have both, it doesn't really work because people say, oh, there's tons of money and BlackRock has all this money and so on. But generally speaking, the money, the people investing in money, it's not their own money.
Is in the textile, apparel, and fashion industry. And we work on 3 or 4 big areas, big subject matters, if you will. So first of all, we work on material science. So new types of cool materials that could be used in apparel for functionality and what have you. And secondly, we work on manufacturing, machinery, engineering new types of ways of making things. So robots and cool things like that. Third, we work on testing solutions or testing standards. How do you ensure what your stuff is doing what you think it's doing? And then finally, we work on enterprise solution. That's the catch-all bucket. We work on supply chains, operations, anything to speed up the industry and make industry more profitable and what have you. And that's how we've been operating for we're about a 12-year-old organization, so we're kind of young. And the reason why we exist is because of this question that the government of Hong Kong asked itself, which is what value do we create in the global business of fashion? 50 years ago, we were manufacturers. We make stuff. So we were the labor component. And now what do we do? And so one of the answers was that maybe we should be the innovation solution for the industry, and hence our existence. So a couple of years ago, we operated like this for a while, and it really bothered me a little bit, because I really didn't know what to work on, what is more important, what is less important, and how relevant are these things to industry. And so we had a exercise about 5 years ago, in which we just went and talked with any and every stakeholder that we can get a hold of in the industry, manufacturers, brands, users of certain products, and we just asked 2 or 3 of the same questions, which is, what problems are you facing, what opportunities do you see, and how can we be useful in working alongside with you. And from there came 3 big buckets of the 3 research domains that we are working on today, and which came out of, and then we actually, the second year, we went and followed up and repeated the same questions to a similar group, though we added some people into it, and we got the same answers. So we're very happy that sort of these are driving our focus. So the first big focus that everybody talked about was sustainability, from the consumer all the way down to the cotton grower. They're saying that, this is a big issue. This is a big practical issue for us because of how we do things today. And this is an issue for us because upstream from me or downstream from me, my customers are asking me for solutions for this and want me to measure this. And so I need to figure out what I can do and how I can do this better. So big sustainability focus. So under there we have a lot of green material research, recycling, circularity. We work on across our research domains, either on systems or machines that could help out, and so that resulted in a lot of research. The second big area that everybody talked about is Industry 4.0. So this is this idea of smart manufacturing, of cyber physical systems, of supply chains and manufacturing solutions, which are smart, right? Systems talking to other systems, making with intelligence, making things that have a marketplace and are right for the market. So different ways of capturing data and then analyzing data and using data, how systems can integrate and work together with each other. So lots of fun work there. And then this third area is a more nebulous area that we kept trying to find a good name for it. But sort of we landed on things that are changing in society, or things that are good for society. And the notion behind that is that across the world, societies are changing. We're getting older, we're living longer, we're healthier, we are more urbanized, our lifestyle has changed. So how can textile and apparel and fashion support these types of changes? We live longer and we want to be healthy. So what are high performance athletic apparel that is good for elderly people? We are doing more things outdoors, and so we demand more from our clothes and from the systems that we wear. So how can we support that? How can we create systems that are that protect, inform, and have lots of functionalities for the user? So those 3 domains have been keeping us busy, and as a result of these domains have been all sorts of interesting research projects that we've been generating. We generate about 20 to 30 new projects a year. We have about 70 live projects, and we have about 160 projects that we've completed. But so, for instance, in the whole area of sustainability, we have a big effort on waterless technologies. We're working on our second system. We're about to announce an industrial system for using supercritical dyeing methods, but in a much simpler and cost-effective manner. Solvent-assisted dyeing. We work on lots of green materials. We work on circularity, both in how do we capture data about it, and how do we manufacture in a way that supports that. A lot of mitigation types of efforts. How do we keep wastewater from getting back in the system? How do we reuse, recycle materials? And so on. So lots of cool efforts, and under which is a research agreement with the H&M Foundation. We're in year 3 of 4-year agreement to work with the foundation on some circularity challenges. So under there we have 2 systems that we just bigger systems that we have announced that we have industrialized: a post-consumer recycling system, a post-consumer separation of materials, polyesters and cotton, and keeping those the recovery in fiber form, so fairly short recycling loops. And then we've just announced a garment-to-garment direct-to-consumer solution, a retail solution, in which we're testing a new business model. We're asking consumers to bring their old garments in to this retail shop that we've set up, and we will break down the apparel that they bring in into fibers, and then we will make yarns out of them, and then we will 3D knit the yarns back into new garments for them. So it's something you can stand there and watch us do. It's a 40-foot container with glass walls in which we're doing the process inside. Industry 4.0 is a lot of work against different types of knowledge that we're learning. How do we make things that people want to buy? How do we get things into the right places so that people can have access to them? Automation of manufacturing. And different types of thinking around how do we integrate front end and back end of supply chains, and then finally for what we're working on social, we started out with lots of tools and things for elderly care. So we worked on fabric-based impact-resistant material to help to prevent injury and falls for elderly. Self-sterilizing material, self-cleaning materials to improve the living environment for elderly care. And as we worked on that, and those became sort of standard issue for a lot of care facilities in the various countries around Asia where we work. And then we started a work for the London Olympics in which we were testing high performance materials. So we work with Olympic athletes, and we're now in the middle of the preparing for the London Olympics. And we work with not so much on the glitzy end of because they're all sponsored, so they have to wear Nike, Adidas, or whatever who their sponsors are when they win. But we work on things like recovery. We help them prevent injury. We help them have what we call incremental improvements to their performance by sleeping better. Help them understand a little bit more what they're going through, what their bodies are going through. And so interesting, cool things like that. We've also redesigned all the uniform for the fire brigade so that they can handle heat and moisture better in very stressful conditions. And the standard issue for extreme conditions for the Marine Police, anti-smuggling group guys who go around in Zodiacs and things like that. So lots of fun, and oftentimes we start on something and we find its application happens to be over here, and things like that. I was trying to struggle, what useful thing can I share with engineering students about applied research? I guess something I talked about yesterday was this idea of scaling quickly. And to scale quickly, I would encourage you to, I think, echo what Terry talked about is a challenge assumptions. And one of the things that we've been successful at is challenging the fundamental research methodology that you've all been taught. You go from lab research, publication, bench scale research, and then pre-industrial scale. So how do you do that in a nice manner that is sort of that makes sense and is responsible and all that? We try to get to scale as quickly as possible. So one of the things we do is, for instance, if we have funding that would allow us to do that for 10 years, we would think, okay, now we have that funding. How do we get to scale in 2 years, and then we blow through that amount as quickly as possible, so that we have something to play around with. And one of the notions the way we think about it is to use the software development model. So we are shipping 1.0. So closure is overrated. This is something we always tell people. messiness is something that we should tolerate and live with, and we should have ambiguity and sort of juggle with that and struggle with that, and that's cool. It doesn't have to be neat and tidy. And involve the end users so that when we're shipping 1.0, it means that we are getting a lot of feedback from the market to tell us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and what can we be doing better. We're not shipping a nice, clean, finished, complete solution there. So that's one idea, and I think the idea is to work in cross-discipline groups, teams. That again, something which was Tariq also just talked about, which is that you applied solutions. It's not only a science solution; it's the business case for it. It's the supply chain case. It's all these multidiscipline problems that we have to solve, and unless we are able to articulate a solution that covers all of that, we are going to have problems getting that thing to market and getting people to use that. The comment was made earlier that a lot of you may not be thinking about the textile, apparel, and fashion industry as engineers and as opportunities for innovation. So good news, lots of low-hanging fruit. This is kind of a really, this is like an old school industry that has a lot of problems and lots of opportunities for bright young engineers to get involved in and really contribute and make and add value to. Bad news, the UN says we have 12 years, right, before we hit the point of no return. So we don't have a lot of time. So what are you waiting for? Thank you. Your teams can do a lot more than they think they can do, and these exciting ideas have this life of its own, and it gets people on board, and it makes you want to do the best work that you can do.
It is super exciting to be contributing to the shift from a linear to a circular fashion industry. Downside is that for us, it was a little bit tricky to find a bio-based solution for our material that meets the fashion customers' needs. Especially when you're talking to designers, they always ask for the only property or feature or color of the material you don't have at the moment. So it's tricky, but it takes time, but it is doable. And so downside is that fashion industry is a little bit crazy, especially.
I think the one thing I'd say in sustainability versus sort of general startups is a tendency to try to build an overly perfect product. So I've seen a lot of situations where, in my experience in entrepreneurship, everyone's different, but I think you want to focus on doing less things and do them really well.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is anytime you go into any new space, there's a whole bunch of uncertainty. You have to be ready for that uncertainty. And the way I put it is, you think you have one variable to solve, but when you actually start doing it, there's like 20 variables underneath.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you start off with 20, you're going to end up with hundreds, and you're not going to be able to solve them all. And if you think of what we did at Rumi, we're bringing the free digital learning revolution offline. When we started off with a low-cost device, a bunch of free content, and implemented into programs on the ground, we didn't build the device because you don't need to build a device. You can go get a cheap hardware from Shenzhen or from somewhere where it's already being made. It's Android-based. We didn't build the content because there's already great free content online. It's increasing without us. We didn't need to do that. And we don't also build the schools on the ground because our partners at UNICEF and Junior Achievement, and they're already on the ground. So we want to build a tool to empower them. I can't tell you how many times I saw in this space people trying to do a similar thing, and they were just trying to do everything at once. And they would say, we're going to build our own special tablet, and then we're going to make sure that the mining sources are sustainable and this, that. I said, look, these are great ideas. I'm like, you're not going to solve all these problems on day one. I'm like, you know how long it takes to actually design hardware, and then like how much you have to spend in terms of working capital to build your own supply runs? Like, you're better off buying what's already there. You start to build in additional planks later. So now we have a partnership with the largest device recycler in North America. But we couldn't do that on day one. So you phase it in. And I'd say the biggest challenge, I think, with sustainability is because it often comes from an academic space with less of a history and execution,
is that you get people with this view that the idea must be pure. Like the circular economy, you must build it in your entire, model. I mean, there's no startup that builds their own supply chain from scratch, right? Like it's hard enough for H&M or someone, too much less a single startup. So you have to understand that it's going to be trade-offs. It won't be the product won't be perfect. The sustainability idea won't be perfect either on day one, but that has to evolve. And I tend to find the sustainability space, it's a lot of perfect theories of like, here's where the world is. Those don't tend to be influenced as often as we would like by the practical realities of business. And then you end up with a bunch of ideas that sound perfect on paper. They never get funding, they never scale. 5 years later, they're still perfect on paper. But an idea without execution is just an idea. And so that's the one thing, challenge of sustainable business is to really I overstress the business rigor, because I think it's the one thing that I've seen missing so far.
For us, as a team, the major risk we had to take was to quit our daily job and our comfort zones in order to start working full-time on the project. Well, it was a brave decision, but it was supported by the fact that we are all emotionally and personally invested in the company. So be brave and don't be afraid if anyone tells you that your idea is too big or it will take too long because or that you are a visionary, because the same happened to us, and at the end of the day we are going to launch our material on the market, so be brave.